assuming was said on Leil Beis to Rosh Hashanah, second night of Rosh Hashanah. This says Rosh Hashanah, so I imagine it's in the day of Rosh Hashanah. As we said, we're going to read 8 Maimarim together, and they're all one long Hemshech. That's the concept of the Hemshech, born here in Ranat. So let's get into it. He says like this: Yichayenu miyomayim b'yom hashlishi yikimenu v'nichya lefanav. So there's a pasuk from Hosea, kind of metaphorically, allegorically talking about the wounds of Israel that will be healed. And basically it says that he's going to enliven us for 2 days. On the third day, we'll stand and live before him. Okay. Hine yechayenu miyomayim, but we right away go into the drush realm of this. What is the drush? What does it mean? Yechayenu miyomayim is going to have us live for 2 days. We will live for 2 days. Kai al beis yamim Rosh Hashanah. It refers to the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. The Rosh Hashanah liolam beis yamim, because Rosh Hashanah is always 2 days. Why is Rosh Hashanah always 2 days? Because of the doubt. Right? Since the only holiday that's on the first of the month, they couldn't get the word out fast enough, even sometimes in Yerushalayim, to know, so they kept 2 days, Yom Achad Aruch, that's called one long day. So this pasuk, therefore, is hinting to this notion of 2 days, he will enliven us. It refers to the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. Really one long 48-hour day. Yom HaShlishi, what do you think Yom HaShlishi refers to then? Yekimenu, it says he'll establish us on the third day, Yom Kippur, right? It's all a pasuk hinting to the Chagim. Ubatana de Beliyahu, Isa Yechayenu Miyomayim Hu Olam Hazeh. But there's several perushim on this. In a different midrash, it says he'll enliven us for 2 days. Refers to Olam Hazeh. Yom HaShlishi Yekimenu Hu Olam Haba. On the third day, he's going to rise us up. Refers to the Olam Haba. Umasha Olam Hazeh Nikra Yomayim. Why is Olam Hazeh called 2 days? And that's because even Gan Eden is also called Olam Hazeh. Gan Eden, basically where you go when you pass away. The Ikar Olam Haba Hanizkar b'Mishnah v'Gemara hu Olam HaTachiyah. Why would Gan Eden be called Olam Hazeh? Because Olam Haba famously has 2 different meanings. What is the 2 different types of explanations of the word Olam Haba? The world to come. It means the world to come, but what it has to, it refers to 2 different things. What are the 2 different things? Mashiach. Afterlife. In other words, Gan Eden, when a person passes away. Why is that called Olam Haba? He says, really, it's already found now. That world is already there now. So when we say it's the Olam Haba, it's the world that's coming. It's not that it's coming, it hasn't happened yet. It's coming to you, right? Coming to a goof near you. That basically, at some point, you're going to experience it. But you can see, but that's also really called Olam Hazeh. That's what he's trying to make a point here. That when it says in the pasuk, Yechayenu miyomayim, he's going to make us live for 2 days, it refers to Olam Hazeh. It also refers to one of the explanations of Olam Haba, which is Gan Eden, because Gan Eden is a spiritual world which already exists now. It's also therefore called Olam Hazeh to a certain degree. What's the true nature of Olam Haba? The world that actually is coming. And that is called the world of Tchiyas HaMesim, right? The world when the dead will rise. So Mashiach really is not totally the answer. Mashiach is sort of the big precursor to the days of Tchiyas HaMesim when the dead will rise. So therefore, the first 2 days in this pasuk refer to Olam Hazeh and Gan Eden. And when it says Yom HaShlishi, Yekimenu, it's referring to the Olam HaTachiyah, because most of the places in, as he says here, in the Gemara and the Mishnah are refer to the Olam Haba as the world of Tchiyah, the resurrection. Where do we see this? For example, in the Mishnah of Pirkei Avos, when we say, we're reading this nowadays, when we say all the Jewish people have a portion in the world to come, what is it referring to? It's referring to what? What? Tchiyas HaMesim. Kayal Olam HaTachiyah, right? Every Jew, due to the nature of their being mitzvah performers, as is said elsewhere, has a portion in the world to come. The Gan Eden hu bichlal Olam Hazeh, and therefore Gan Eden, the place where people go when they pass away, it's really part of Olam Hazeh, therefore, because, again, as I said, it's already here. V'zeu inyan yomayim, hainu zeh olam v'gan Eden. And that's what it means. 2 days we will live. It means this world and Gan Eden. Oh, Olam Hazeh v'yemos Mashiach. Or we could even say it refers to, there's another perush of what it means 2 days. It can mean this world and Gan Eden, or it can even mean this world and the days of Mashiach, which are also, again, not really what's called the Olam Haba. The days of Mashiach are still somewhat days of, as Rambam at least writes, the regular reality that the world will continue itself in its normal way. Whereas Biyom HaShlishi, right, Yikimenu hu Olam Haba shu Olam HaTachiyah. According to both readings, that refers to the world of the resurrection. Come on in. Room for everybody. Lahavin shaychas beis haperushim hanal zelazeh. Now we want to do is trying to understand how these two different explanations go together, right? What was the first explanation of this pasuk? No, sir. Maybe. We said 3 actually. But what was the first one? The first one was that the 2 days refers to Rosh Hashanah, and the third day is Yom Kippur. And the second one we said is refers to Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba. The only thing is that Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba had a couple different ways of looking at it. Right? So in order to understand how these two basic Perushim come together, whether it's Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, or Olam Hazeh and Olam Haba, here you go, guys. These are the famous words. Tzrich lahavin lahakdim techila, right? Tzrich lahakdim. He doesn't techila, right? We have to first preface every single next mimer, so to speak, of a hemshech. In the very beginning, it always has these words. Tzrich lahakdim techila. We have to first preface inyan bina yaser nidalisha, right? Yosem beish, because that's where we left off, right? So if you notice, this is how a hemshech works. We don't get it, every class we get to kind of redefine this, but we're in the middle of a topic about Bina, Yesera, and Dibor, and the Goof, and everything we've been talking about for the last, a couple of weeks. All of a sudden, he decides that it's Rosh Hashanah. We're going to start talking about a new pasuk, a new mimer. So he asks a couple fresh questions, and then we go right back into the general theme, and you'll see by the end of the mimer, he'll continue this general theme, but it will wind up being the answer to a new set of questions. Previously, it was the answer to an old set of questions. Quite frankly, in the first questions that we asked, we didn't get to those answers yet because those are the general questions of the whole Hemshech. We'll only get those answers as we go deeper and deeper. So what is this connection between these two explanations of this pasuk? And we first have to preface this concept we've been working on. There's a bina yeser anita be'isha yosem be'ish. That a woman has greater bina than a man. Shnizbar la'el, we explained earlier, al b'chinas hadibor shenikra isha. And we said that this pasuk, or this chazal, refers to really dibor, right? Which is speech. So even though it says she has extra bina, the woman more than the man, we said this is you can apply this to speech, right? Because the speech is called a woman. Why is speech called a woman? They love to speak.
Like a receiving end?
It's a receiving. It's a receiver. It has nothing of her own. The quality of speech just accepts the intellect and the emotion that you put into it. It's like the moon, right? It just reflects the light of the sun. The faculty of speech is called a woman because it's a receiver. Sheyesh bezeh yisron koach. But nonetheless, this receiver, as we've been describing, she has this extra bina, i.e. the speech has an extra power. Yisron koach. And we said, strangely, this receiver somehow winds up adding to the husband, which is the intellect and the emotions, even though she's just busy receiving. He's never been such a man, where all of a sudden the intellect is superior and the emotions are felt even greater, merely because they've been accepted by this receiver. Ruchnius. Guys, we got to settle down. Settle in. Settle in, Chevra. Hine kashem shu bedibor, just like it is with speech. Shu bechinas hashpa ruchnius, which speech is called hashpa ruchnius. Why is speech called hashpa ruchnius? This is something we've been dancing back and forth. What's hashpa gashmius if speech is hashpa ruchnius?
Action.
We're saying speech is called hashpa ruchni. It's a spiritual giving over. What is the physical giving over
The action.
compared to speech? We've been saying it's like the seed of man, right? The putrid drop. So, right, there's a man can give over, we said, a chitzonius aspect of himself, which is his speech, which is basically spirituality, because you're not really giving over anything physical when you talk to someone. I mean, there's some sound waves moving around, but you're not actually transferring a seed, right? So just like it is in speech, which is called the spiritual hashpa, and it's also called shefa chitzonis bichlal. It's called external shefa. Why is it called external? Again, because you don't give your essence over when you speak. You only give rays of your mind. You don't actually give a person a mind like you do when you have a baby. So just like it is in this external, so to speak, kanal kamokin hu yuvan b'hashpa penimis lo lid bedome. So it is similar concept of this bini asera in the isha, which is also can be found in the penimius hashpa, which is having babies. In other words, lo lid bedome, that you give birth to something that's compared to you. The hashpa zu hi bechinas hashpa penimis v'atzmius. Obviously, this type of hashpa is much deeper. The atzmus navsho nimshach b'hashpazu. How do we see that? Because the essence of your soul is drawn out with such a hashpa. Adju b'domelo mamash, to the point that you can actually basically clone yourself with this gashmias hashpa and make another one of you. Obviously, it's much more profound than the shefa that you give out with your mere speech. Not only that, but as we said in the previous mimer, that there can be something be called yafe koach haben mikoach ha'av. What does that mean? Translation?
Well, if the son is the will of the father is the will of the son.
Even greater strength for the son than the father.
Yeah, this thing that you give birth to can be greater than you. Right? Yafe koach haben, greater is the power of the son, the power of the father. How is that possible? If he's just a derivative of you, how can he be greater than you? Because you're giving over your essence. You may or may not have flourished with expressing your essence, but the son has the essence. So if he wants to, he can dig deep into that essence and be much, much greater in a revealed sense than you. You both share the same essence, but that's the point. Because you're giving over your essence, it could come out that the son's even greater than the father.
He's not talking about the usefulness of the son?
No, he's not. Yafe koach haben mikoach ha'av. I mean, look, you can translate sentences in many, many ways, but all that's not what he means here, for sure. No. You could say that you could simply say the son is stronger than the father. I guess that's a simple reading, but that's not what we mean here at all. However, even this, that there's this hashpa gashmi, it's also only due to the makabel. In other words, the fact that the essence can come out, right? And there's even the person can give over his atzmius. It's also because of the makabel, the receiver. In other words, this that you can produce a clone of yourself. It's through obviously the nekeva, the woman, and the waiting with this drop in the womb of the mother for 9 months. Only through that quality. In other words, we're saying that the Gashmias Hashpa is infinitely greater, but again, also that is only due, right, to the effect of the bina of the woman upon this thing. Otherwise, you didn't really make anything so special at all. The idea is that you can reveal your essence, but it's only if it's accepted by the makabel. By inyan hu dehina yadua. So the concept is, behold, it is known, for the need of giving hashpa in order to give birth. Bedoma means something which is compared to you. I've been saying sort of the word clone because I don't know a good translation. In order to do this, nimshach giloy or elyon milamayla. So in order to have such a hashpa, where you can create such an intense revelation within yourself that you can produce a clone, it requires a revelation of a higher light from above. As the pasuk in Bereshit says, men and male and female, he created them, and he blessed them, and he said, procreate, be fruitful and multiply. And we know based on the concept of Shir Hashirim, when it says that Shlomo was called king and he was crowned with the crown that his mother crowned him with. Right? What is this idea that he was crowned with the crown that his mother crowned him with? The Atara, he bechinas keser yidua. So first of all, the crown is the union of keser. The word Atara also means keser, crown. And really, that crown is the source from where this essential shefa comes out. In other words, what we're saying is that when a person produces a seed, really, like it says in Tanya, it's like his brain, essentially, his chokhmah in his brain condenses and creates a physical version of his whole DNA in this spot. But the reality is that when you talk, your brain is also condensing itself and producing intelligence. What is it that makes the brain be able to condense itself, to basically clone itself inside of this drop? It's not just coming from the brain. There's actually something coming from the keser, something which is a or elyon, lamaila, like he just said, which has to be triggered in order to enable the brain to tap into such a panemius place in order to produce such a panemius atzmius dika shefa. And that's what he's saying. This is called the crown that his mother crowned him with. This is called the misham hu shorasham shachas hashpa atzmi. That is where this essential shefa comes from. Shefa atzmis, what you tell me what it means. It's the difference between the shefa chitzonius and the shefa panemius, which we just talked about. The external shefa and the internal shefa. The external shefa is speech, spiritually, we said. Spiritual shefa. The internal or the essential is the physical shefa, which is the seed. So we're saying, what is it that creates this brain's ability to produce such an essential cloning of itself? It doesn't come from the brain itself. It comes from a higher light, which is sort of machriya, like we said. It forces the brain to be able to go so deep into itself to clone itself. And this is what we're calling the crown, the keser, which it says in the pasuk that the keser was given to at least Shlomo by his mother. She crowned him. What is the mother? Is Bina, right? We'll get to that in a second. But also we're seeing this because when it says that the men and women in Bereshis were created and then blessed, right? And then told Peru Revu. Why do they need a blessing to go Peru Revu? Because the man and the woman, there needs to be some higher level of bracha that comes down to give them this ability to have such a high level of hashpah. This gashmias hashpah, which is really the essence of the hashpah. Right? And when is this pasuk referring to regarding King Solomon and this crown from his mother? It says, Hamshachas atar hi biyom chasunaso. It says there that he was crowned on his mother on the day of his wedding. Again, the day of the wedding is the day when you're going to have for the first time in your life, you hope, this essential hashpah, right? Because you were careful from zar levatala your whole life. And therefore, Yom Chasunasu is the first time a person has the ability to have this essential hashpah. So it says he was crowned. He got this level of keser. We'll see how it's associated with the mother that gave him this crown. But when? On the day of his wedding, dafka. In other words, why? Bishvil hamakabel. Because of the makabel. Now that there is this feminine aspect, there's a receiver of this hashpah, then he can tap into this crown. Which we see that the essential hashpah does not come except from the makabel. You have a hand up, or you just Go ahead.
We say that to be able to produce a physical shefa, right? Chatzonius. Panemius. It comes from level keser, yeah.
That's what we're saying.
But we're also saying that Chatzonius comes from keser.
When do we say that?
In the last.
The chitzonius. In other words, the speech. You're saying.
Speech comes from what do they call it? Something.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying there.
The Chachma Kesser.
Yeah.
It's a pretty high level Kesser. So what level does this have to reach to be able to manifest into the physical?
Right. So obviously, he was setting us up there to go higher, right? In other words, you make a very good point, actually, very good point. You understand what he said? We just learned a whole mimer about speech, where we mamash got all excited, where we climbed up in these little addresses to essentially the level of the kadmus haseichel. Remember, it was the chokhmah of Keser of Atik, which we said is basically when a person speaks and uses his words, he taps into the source of the letters of those words, and therefore he increases the amount of chokhmah and midos. Right, just like that's how the mimer started. You remember that? So that's basically called the Keser at work. And what is that? Just in speech, just in the chitzonius of the hashpah, right? So now we've moved over and said that we're going to a much, much deeper level of hashpah, which is kind of puts the speech concept to shame because we're cloning ourselves and we're saying it goes to the Keser. He said, well, we just were in the Keser, and you have a good question there. He's gonna explain there's levels upon levels. But yeah, that's a very good insight. The fact that you said that makes me very happy. It means you're following along. But the answer is deep and wide, and I can't tell you right now, because he has to take us there. It's a long journey, but that is the good. That is what he's wanting you to ask 100%. Okay, K'de'isa b'Zohar. Now, where were we? That this idea of drawing from this Keser is which is on your day of your chasana when you need to have this penimius hashpah. It's dafka b'shvil makabel. It comes out because of the makabel. When there's no makabel, you're not allowed to have such a level of hashpah. K'de'isa b'Zohar al pasik gadol havaya umuhulal mi'od bi'ir Elokeinu. There's a pasuk in Tehillim which says, "Great is havaya and exceedingly praiseworthy bi'ir Elokeinu, in the city of our God." Simple meaning is the city of our God represents Jerusalem, and God is great in Jerusalem, right? That's kind of the simple meaning. But the truth is, the Mefarshim ask, with the Zohar, it says, Masai hu gadol, kishuhu be'ir lokenu dafka. Now it says, great is Hashem. So there's such a thing called Havaya. And then now we're learning there's something called Gadol Havaya, which is somehow like an upping of the level of Havaya. And what the Zohar is trying to say is, Masai hu gadol. When does the Havaya suddenly become Gadol? Only when he goes into Ir Elokeinu. What does Ir Elokeinu now represent? Huh? Say it again.
Our heart.
Our heart? Nice. Cute. No. But what is Ir Elokeinu? We've learned this before several times. I'm thinking David Bernstein might have his head wrapped around this one. Just a hunch. Noam, what's Ir Elokeinu over here, guys? We said it many, I think at least 4 times. What does Elokeinu refer to? I take it back. I'll make it simpler for you. An easier hint. What is Ir? What is a city referring to? There you go. I knew it was Bernstein. Because you know what your name means? Stone.
What did he say?
He said it's the Indian of the stones. What's the idea of the stones? Like it says in the Sefer Yetzirah. What does it say? Shtei avanim bonim shtei batim. Shlosh avanim bonim shisha batim. What does that mean? 2 stones build 2 houses. 3 stones build 6 houses. So in academia, they say, you see, this book is a book of foolishness. That's literally one of like their reasons that they say this is like a silly book of, okay, let's not speak of them. But the idea is what Avram Avinu was saying was a secret of mathematical depth, of the secret of the Jewish language, of the Hebrew language, which is that the stones are called letters. Letters are called stones because they're building blocks. And they hold things inside of them. They hold words, meaning. So if you have 2 stones, i.e. you have 2 letters, you can make 2 houses, i.e. 2 words, right? Aleph and Beis, you can have Av and Ba, right? Any 2 letters, you can make 2 words in Hebrew. If you have 3 letters, you can build 6 houses. You can make 6 different words out of any 3 Hebrew letters. And once you get to 4, 5, 6 the numbers of combinations, we'll ask Noam to help us with the math, they get extraordinarily high, and it's a very, very intense level of infinite scale that quickly comes from adding a few components together. Infinite meaning can live inside of those many houses. And to the point that when you have a bunch of houses, what do you have? You have a neighborhood. When you have a bunch of neighborhoods, what do you have? You have a city. And therefore, when it says Ir Elokeinu, it's referring to the Torah in its completeness. All the letter combinations, it's called the city. And it's called the city of God, right? And so therefore, now the Zohar comes along and says, Gadol Havaya, Umuhulal Me'od, Be'ir Elokeinu, great is God and extraordinarily praiseworthy. In the city of our God, the Zohar comes and says, when is Havaya made Gadol? Specifically when it comes into the city, i.e. the letters. When the spiritual Or Ein Sof cloaks itself into the city, the letters, then it becomes greater than it was before it went into those letters. Does it sound familiar? This is like the theme of our entire Hemshech over here. The Zohar says it in a line, right? You understand what we're saying here? So it becomes Gadol Havaya when it goes specifically into the letters. Yoshua, Baruch Hashem, it's crowded, but grab a chair and join us. Ma'ashe ein kein malka below matrunisa. Lav ihu melech v'lav ihu gadol. Here, go back. I'll translate that. Not so a king without a queen, right? Because you see how the queen is called the letters here, right? The king is called the Or Ein Sof. The queen would be called the city of God, the letters. And the king is not great, and he's not a king. That's what it says. The Zohar says a king without a queen, he's not a king, and he's not great. He's not Gadol. So Havaya is not called a king, and he's not called Gadol unless he cloaks himself into those letters of the Torah. That suddenly makes God the king, and it makes him Gadol Havaya. Everyone following along? Hainu ki malka hu b'china zah. Now let's plug in the secrets of the Zohar here. It says he's not a king without a queen. So king, malka, represents the level called zah. What is zah? Zer anpin. It's the 6 spheros above malchus, which is normally called the queen. Shezeu shem havaya b'chinas hatiferes. And basically zah represents the shem havaya at the level called Tiferes. Let's explain that. Why is Zah called the Shem Havaya? In general, we want to... What's that? In Zah? Zah, in general, can sometimes just be called Tiferes. Why is that? Because Zah represents the emotions in general. Right? You have the Yud K, Vav K. Yud is Chochma, Hey is Bina, Vav, which is also called Zah, is all the emotions, and then Malchus is the final Hey. So Zah represents the emotions. So of all the emotions, the essence of the emotions is really Tiferes. Why? Because essentially there's right and left and center, and the center is a combination of the right and the left, and there's also, in the emotions, there's also 2 grades of emotions. There's Chesed, Gvur, and Tiferes, and there's Netzach, Hod, Yesod. The Netzach, Hod, Yesod are really just an extension of the Chesed, Gvur, and Tiferes. So really all you have is Chesed, Gvur, and Tiferes. Netzach, Hod, Yesod is like when they, sort of travel down the lane a little bit, but it's the same essential thing. So when it comes to Chesed, Gvur, and Tiferes, Tiferes is the essence of them because it bears all of them as in one. Just like we say that Yaakov is the choice of the fathers because he has a little bit of Avram and Yitzchak in him. He bears them both. And therefore, in general, you can say that Zah sometimes just called Tiferes for that reason. Now, why is it connected to the Shem Havaya? Because Tiferes is connected with the Shem Havaya. We see this we say this every morning. Hu Haya, Hu Hoveh, Hu Yiyeh, B'Tiferes, B'Sifara, right? Haya, Hoveh, V'Yiyeh is the Shem Havaya. Why is it called Tifara? Why is it called Tiferes, the Shem Havaya? Because the Shem Havaya is basically that which has all potential opposites unified inside of it. It's basically, there's no separation. It's a complete whole of all potentiality. And that's what Tiferes is, right? Tiferes is the idea of beauty, which is the idea of having different colors mixed together and making one beautiful color. So therefore, the emotions, which are in Zah, which are holy emotions, Zah is a set of spheres in Atzilus, where there's perfection. but it's also a set of spheros in Atzilus, which are the first place where you can have a broad range of different things. Chochmah and Bina are sort of individual singularities. But when you get into the emotions, there's 6 of them, right? And the idea that all those 6 emotions are really somehow not arguing with each other, and they're all in a set of simple oneness, that's because the Shem Havaya shines there. We're not saying that it's black, if we're saying it's white, because white is like the combination of all the colors, right? Black is the Indian of the Kalim, which is the absence of light, right? Which would be like sort of Malchus, right? But the idea here is that, therefore, we find the different spheros have different names of Hashem that are associated with them. For example, the sphere of Chesed has a certain name of Hashem. Which name is associated with Chesed every time? Kale. Aleph and Lamed goes on the Kli of Chesed. In other words, the light inside of all of the spheros is the same, which is the light is called by the Shem Havaya. The light is called the Shem Havaya, but the vessel of each sphere has a different. That's what the 7 unerasable names of God are. They're the names of the spheros of the Kalim of the 7 spheres of Zah. So, for example, the light inside them all is all called Havaya, but the vessel, for example, of Chesed is called Kale. What's the vessel of Gevurah called? Elokim. What's the vessel of Tiferes called? Havaya, which is strange because we just said the light is called Havaya. But in Tiferes, even the vessel is called Havaya. And the idea is because this is a vessel which is very unique, it doesn't block off the full capacity of the Shem Havaya because it's this blend which allows many things to simultaneously be, which is the inyan of the light anyway. There's a certain vessel which can be translucent for such a high light. And therefore, in Tiferes is the inyan of Havaya, and that represents Zah. Everyone understand that whole lesson right there? And that's what he said. That's called the king. Right? You have the king and the queen is Zah and Malchus. Zah is called the king, and therefore it's called Havaya for this reason. But is Havaya Gadol right there? Not until he marries up with his queen. Right? Gadol Havaya Be'ir Elokeinu, which is the vessels, the letters which are going to be in Malchus. So the king is called Zah, which is Havaya, which is Tiferes. That should all make sense now to us. V'hine below Matrunisa, he bechines Malchus, without his queen, which is Malchus, Laviu Melech, but Laviu Gadol. He can't really be called a king, and he can't really be called great. Ki Iker Hagadlus Nimshach bechines Ha'atara Dafka. And why is that? Because how does the king become great? How does the king become a king? Doesn't the king have to have a crown on his head? You can't be a king without a crown. I mean, that's bad news. You don't want that. That's a malik. But if you have a crown, then that means you could be a king, you could be called great. What does the crown represent? We said the Kesser, of course. So basically, the idea is that when the king will come and get married, when he has need suddenly to have a queen, this is when the king gets great, i.e. he gets his crown, which means he suddenly is able to tap into this deep inner penimius shefa. It only becomes relevant when he needs to get married. Before that, he's not great. Means before that, he doesn't have access to the Kesser. This thing called Gadlus, greatness, comes from the Kesser. The Atara, Kamashal HaMelech. Just like a king. How does he become a king? You put a crown on his head, right? So he becomes great. Why do you put a crown on his head? Because suddenly he's associated with the kingdom. He has a people. He has a makabel. And by the way, you're not allowed to be a king in Jewish law unless you have a wife. Can't be a Kohen Gadol either. You can't be Gadol in the world unless you're married. That's the law. You can't serve in the Sanhedrin. You need to have this Gadlus. You need to capture the Kesher. That's why we put also a talis on only when you get married. What is the talis? You wrap it around your head. It's the makif light. It only comes to a person when they get married. The Indian, don't worry. It's good also before you're married. You're okay. You got to build up something to get married with. The Indian hachtara baruch niyasi. Now, what is the spiritual crowning of this king? Shema'orim mamshichim ratzun l'melucha. The spiritual crowning of this king is that you arouse in him and draw out the desire to reign over the people. Remember, like the story of the Rebbe, for the first year, he didn't want to reign. He didn't want the bother of having to rule over the people. The king is greater than all the other people. But on the contrary, his being greater than all the other people gives him a tendency to not ever be with the people, because he's just like, what does he have to do with these like lowly beings, right? Just like light, we said in the previous classes. The nature of light is to go up. It's trying to go higher and higher into its source. It does not get anything from going down. It's not like racist or anything. It doesn't mind, seeing the people, but it's not its place. It's busy like reaching the stars and being totally aloof from the world and from all the running of the lowly business of the world. Right? So in order to make this, that's the guy you want though, right? The guy who's infinitely higher than you, he's the guy you want to be your king. So how are you going to get him to be a king, to go the other way? You have to put the crown on his head. What is the crown spiritual? The crown represents the Kesser, which is the will. You have to basically somehow summon in him the will to want to reign over you. And the only way you do that is by making yourself subservient to him. If you come and you say like, please be my king, he gets a certain tainug from the realization that he can run the world, right? It arouses in him a will to reign. And this is essentially comes from the people crowning him, all gathering together and saying like, we need you. We want to see our king. We can't live without you. So that like brings out of him a will which was not really surfaced before that Makabel came and brought it to his attention. Because again, just like we said by light, when he realizes that all these people need him to run their lives and to run the world, he realizes there might be a greater, even higher light in going down than there was in going up. Just like we've been saying about the idea of the letters and the vessels and the body throughout the classes. Now this is a very deep thing. We all apparently have this quality of wanting to reign and be the king. Maybe that doesn't come as a surprise to you. But the truth is that quality of kingship inside of us is very, very hidden. Not all of us obviously have the same level of malchus as the actual king, right? Because our malchus will come out, let's say, as being the king of our family, or being the king of our local surroundings, or whatever little area of the kingdom we've been sort of have a shlichus to operate. But the king himself, he has a deep-seated interest in being the king, but it's super hidden inside of him. Again, for the reasons that we said before, because he's so great and high in his own qualities that his nature is just to go up and not be burdened with the lowliness. But he has the quality of kingship deeply inside him, because he is, after all, the king, right? He's born that way, in fact. Certain persons like chosen from birth to be the ruler of all of Am Yisrael, but he's not interested in it. That's exactly why we want him for that job, right? He's busy somewhere else, but that's why he's head and shoulders above the rest. He's the guy we need. So that quality of reigning is in him in a very deep, deep hidden way. In fact, it shows nowhere up on his radar. It's not there. It says there's certain mitzvahs that you can only do by accident. Like, for example, we just had in the parsha last week, the Indian of shicha, right? If you're going to go harvesting your crops, and if you forget some of them while you're busy with the sickle, they belong to the poor. But what if you decide, I'm going to do a little nice job for the poor, I'm going to leave them on purpose, I'm going to forget them. They're not, then the poor takes them, they're stealing from you. It's not his, it's still yours. You have to literally forget. It's an interesting type of mitzvah. You have to not want to do that mitzvah in order to be able to do that mitzvah. And the same is true when it comes to being king of Israel. If you're looking for the job, you're not the guy for the job. You have to basically not want it. It has to happen to you, unfortunately. And all of a sudden, you're put in this position where suddenly, and that's what the point is, it's hidden inside of you completely. Even to you, it's hidden. Like I said, the Rebbe, he didn't know who he was. He didn't know he was mamash being primed his whole life to take on, and he didn't know his own. No, he had no interest whatsoever, just like Moshe Rabbeinu, right? He said, Shlach na bi'ad tishlach. He said, God, do me a favor, send someone else. I think you totally got the wrong guy. This is totally not my job. That's the guy who's the king. It's hidden inside of him deeply, his interest in being a king. Shmuel didn't know, yeah. We're talking about the king himself doesn't know. David didn't know. Sure, yeah. No, any king, a real king, that's like his Indian. It comes upon him from deep within. And we're saying that therefore, since he doesn't know about it, he doesn't want anything from it, we need to arouse it from him, and to draw forth and open up, enlighten him to the fact that he does want to be the king. That's where they started writing the Rebbe letters of his kashrus, right? The whole story goes only when the Rebbe realized he wasn't getting out of this, people were putting him in this position, he eventually, against his will, took it on. Right? You have to arouse and draw down the will to be the king, begiloi, so it should reveal itself. Sheyir to lios melech, that the king wants to be a king. And by the way, this is true of every single one of us. There's an aspect of us, because we're called b'nei malachim. We are Bama's children of kings, and we have kingly qualities in each and every single one, every Jew. We're called a nation of kings, right? That there's an aspect of you that actually has this power to take on the burdens of your people. You're not aloof to the operation here. The whole Am Yisrael is your problem to deal with, right? These are your people, but that is so hidden inside of us. Some of us never get to it. And he says, Zeu inyan hachtara. And how do we arouse the king to want to have this will? Well, we said the will is his keser, right? So you put the crown, you crown him. Hainu al yidei ha'am. And the king is not going to crown himself. That crown will sit there for eternity. Unless the people pick it up and say, put this on, you need to be our king. And how do they do that? Because they say, we will accept whatever you tell us to do. That's what these letters of Iskashrus are. When you write a letter and you say, Rebbe, you accept my pan, you're the Rebbe, you're basically saying, I'm your servant, I will do whatever you say. I'm your hands and feet, do whatever you want. When the king sees suddenly that he has hands and feet, and that there's a willing participant, someone who wants to marry him. It's the same thing with you become a king when you get married. Right? We call it a chassan zeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu, chassan dome lamelech. It says a chassan is like a king. Because why? Because suddenly someone wants to marry you. You're like, you know what? I was happy studying and I really don't need this in my life. But if she's going to take on my business as her business, it arouses in you. You're like, well, I could work with this. You know what I'm saying? Like, if she'll mamish be a proper makabel, then I can actually express my true self even more. And suddenly the king realized he could be gadol havaya if he has an ir Elokeinu, something which is ready to be batul to him. And so it is with the whole nation of Israel that we accept Ol Malchusu Baratzon, we accept his kingship willingly. Liyos Batelim Elav Lagamri, to be completely nullified to the king. Amen Ken Yiratzon. Let's partner up some chavrusas and accept our king inside of us.